This is a short presentation on the prominence of multitasking in today's society. This presentation's aim is to identify what exactly multitasking is, why it has become so prevalent, and what are the long-term effects of multitasking on learning. What is multitasking? Here's one definition I found that I think did a good job of finally simplifying really what multitasking means. The definition says the act of undertaking more than one task at one time. In computing, the concurrent execution of multiple tasks by a single computer processor. Of all the varied definitions, I discovered this one was the most simplistic. The definition appears to have evolved from an initial technical term, which was then broadened to define human activities as well. This is the definition, but what is multitasking in practice? If you've got 5 windows open at the same time on the computer, jumping from playing a game to browsing something to writing a Word document to email, those are the types of activities we're talking about when we define multitasking. The evolution of multitasking. It makes sense the term was adopted from computing vernacular because the evolution of computers is what has led to the current multitasking phenomenon. We certainly didn't always multitask because it was traditionally very hard to do so. It is amazing to consider that many college students today have never actually sent a snail mail letter in their lives. Computers allow us to operate multiple windows or programs at the same time. Subsequently, people do it simply because they can. Rarely do people consider whether or not they should. Of course, we also then have cell phones, which are now getting smarter and allowing us to do multiple applications remotely. We have reached a state of perpetual connection, and again, not many are asking if this is necessarily a good thing. Why is multitasking so popular? The answer to this question is really very simple. In our modern society, the idea of increased efficiency is extremely attractive. To a business person, the allure of writing emails while taking calls appears to be a time saver. To a student, writing a paper while cruising YouTube is simply more entertaining. We have collectively developed an on-demand multimedia personality. We want as much as possible, as quickly and efficiently as possible. Why do we insist on watching wedding bloopers on YouTube and updating our fantasy football team while drafting important documents? Because we think we can and we think it's more efficient. The following studies are going to explain to us that that's not necessarily true. Clifford Nass is the Thomas M. Stork Professor at Stanford University. Dr. Nass and his communications department conducted a research study to attempt to understand the implications of multitasking on learning. The researchers studied 262 college undergraduates, dividing them into high and low multitasking groups and comparing such things as memory, ability to switch from one task to another, and being able to focus on a task. Dr. Nass's study concentrated on 3 specific abilities. The first, filtering, the ability to ignore irrelevant information and focus on relevant. The assumption was that this was an area where high multitaskers would excel, but in fact, multitaskers are suckers for distraction and for the irrelevant. And so, the more irrelevant information they see, the more they are attracted to it. The second ability is the ability to manage your working memory. Once again, the high multitaskers scored much more poorly than the low to non-multitaskers. And finally, the biggest surprise, Dr. Nass, was that multitaskers were even slower and worse at switching from one task to another. You would have thought just the opposite. At the very least, you thought they would be strong in this area, but again, they're actually worse. It was frightening to the researchers. A pretty clear conclusion was that people who multitask very frequently are also the ones that believe they are excellent at it, when in fact, as far as the research shows, they are typically the worst. A similar study was conducted by Dr. Poldrick at UCLA. The researchers used functional magnetic resonance imaging to examine brain activity and function, a technique that uses magnetic fields to spot active brain areas by telltale increases in blood oxygen. Participants in the study who were in their 20s learned a simple classification task by trial and error. They were asked to match predictions after receiving a set of cues concerning cards. With a second set of cards, they performed a simultaneous task, listening to high and low beeps through headphones. The results clearly identified significant differences between the 2 study groups. On the task they learned with the distraction, they could not extrapolate. In scientific terms, their knowledge was much less flexible. This result demonstrates a reduced capacity to recall memories when placed in a different context. The results from these studies provide convincing evidence that, in fact, multitasking is an inefficient exercise. The Stanford study taught us that showed us that multitaskers were typically worse at ignoring useless information, worse at taking in information and organizing it. At best, they had an equal memory. They had less ability to switch from one task to another. And the more media people use, the worse they are at using any one media. The UCLA study showed us that multitasking reduced the capacity to recall memories when placed in a different context, could not extrapolate in scientific terms. Their knowledge was much less flexible. Multitasking reduced the participant's subsequent knowledge about the task during a follow-up session. The studies indicate that multitasking changes the way people learn. The researchers noted that they are not saying never to multitask, just don't multitask while you're trying to learn something new that you hope to remember. Still to be answered is why the folks who are worst at multitasking are the ones doing it the most. It's sort of a chicken or egg question. Is multitasking causing them to be lousy at multitasking, or is their lousiness at multitasking causing them to be multitaskers? Is it born or learned? In a society that seems to encourage more and more multitasking, the findings have social implications. Is multitasking harmful for future cognitive abilities? Following the study at Stanford, Dr. Nass stated, it's very frightening to us. I think the reason it's so frightening is we actually didn't study people why they were multitasking. We studied people who were chronic multitaskers. And even when we did not ask them to do anything close to the level of multitasking they had been doing, their cognitive processes were impaired. So basically, they are worse at most of the kinds of thinking not only required for multitasking, but what we generally think of as involving deep thought. There's evidence that if they stop multitasking, this discounted ability can be repaired. However, we're not sure. We're not sure whether these abilities are built into the brain or whether, in fact, practice makes them either better or worse. But there's no question whatsoever that multitasking, especially among those who do it the most, is at the very least ineffective and at the worst harmful. Multitasking is a symptom of what is now being called IAD, or Internet Addiction Disorder. It is a positive sign that more attention is being paid to the downfalls of the technology revolution that we've all been experiencing and reaping the benefits of. So though IAD is not currently included on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, it is gaining attention, and people are beginning to understand that it is, in fact, a problem. Too much information, too much accessibility to electronic technologies has tremendous negative implications when it is abused. One of the things that's brought the debate into focus is the opening of the Heavensfield Retreat Center. It is the first United States recovery program for internet addiction disorder. The program is called Restart. It's a 45-day program designed to take sufferers of IAD and bring balance to their lives. Individuals are restricted from any type of electronic media, and they are forced to do mundane physical activities to connect them and bring, again, balance to their lives. They're required to cook their meals, to do house chores and yard work. A very interesting phenomenon that the internet revolution has brought along with it. So, in conclusion, at the very least, multitasking is ineffective. As a society, we have been swept up in the wave of technological advancement, and rarely have we taken the time to objectively evaluate how best to use these new tools. After conducting the initial research for this report, I began to gain a little objectivity in my own multitasking exercises. I chronically check email. That's one thing that doing this research made me more attentive to. On the first day that I counted after doing this research, I checked my email over 45 times. By the last day, I was down to 6. So while not necessarily a major achievement or change, I think that recognition is the first step to improvement or attentiveness. With that, I hope that this report will give you the ability to perhaps take some objective reflection on your own multitasking and try to make a better decision on how to use technology in the future. Thank you for listening.